Sandy, what's the story about?
Didn't you see the film?
I did.
What do you think the story's about?
My audience hasn't seen it yet.
I mean, you know, this is really something where I think it's a very personal. I could put my points of views on this film, which are completely different than Ben's, which are completely different than Bronwyn's. I mean, if I put it in a nutshell, I would be doing it a disservice. But it's essentially about a man on his way down to get married, and the forces of nature that he encounters, which one of them happens to be me, which is completely opposite of anything he's been around, and who makes him question whether or not the decision he's getting ready to make is right.
What does your character represent? Freedom?
No, actually, in an odd way. I mean, she's incredibly free, seemingly by her actions and her, you know, how wild she is. But she's actually shackled more so than he is, because her freedom is motivated by fear and insecurity, and sort of a fear of stopping and having to deal with the fact that she might not be worth a thing.
And what does he represent in her life?
Learning how to love somebody, and taking the chance of stopping and really committing to something without the fear of being left. It's not the fact that you might be left. It's if you're going to keep running, you'll never know what it's like to be stood by. And he shows her what it's like to stand by somebody you love.
You know, it's a very unusual film for a Hollywood studio movie. Did that come across in the script as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the concerns, was, are you going to change it? And they said no, they wouldn't. I mean, the ending, the twists and turns that they had, my character especially, I didn't want them to water it down or make it something sweeter or nicer, take the edge away. So, and that was on part of DreamWorks. That's to their benefit, and also Bronwyn, who's incredibly edgy and dark and has a very particular way of looking at things. She would never have let that happen. She would fight it tooth and nail.
Did you have any concerns about playing an edgier type?
Not at all, because it's more like me than you know, than most of the characters that I've played had elements of myself, but it's a very personal side of me, which is, you know, half the monologues that Ben said were essentially Ben saying them to Sandy, and I'm like, okay, which is very revealing, and sort of putting, I mean, Ben was dealing with certain issues, I was dealing with certain issues in life and relationships where they were basically our issues in the film.
You know, it seems, looking at the film, it seems that there was you guys were really getting along well.
Yeah.
And was this the case, or is it just
Absolutely.
good directing?
Absolutely. You can't fake that. You can't pretend, you know. You can show passion in a sexual way, you know, you can hate the person, still replicate that on screen, but the enjoyment of the person on a comedic level and in a free spirit level, is, you can't fake that. We got along really well. Yeah. I really admire him.
How difficult is it to keep a Hollywood career going?
You know, I think it's hard if you see it that way, of wanting to keep that Hollywood career going. I think if you just make choices of, you know, I learned that lesson the hard way. You know, other people wanted that Hollywood career going. I just wanted my career, which that I learned was not the typical way that the Hollywood career would go, and that's what's good for me. So the fear of losing something or not having success isn't detrimental to me, because I'm doing all the things that I want to do. I don't feel like I have to maintain a status where I can get a cover of a magazine, you know. How many people want to buy your face after a while anyway? They've seen you every which way, and it's old. Let someone else grace the covers, you know. I like the direction I've taken, which is a different direction than I took before.
But you still have no more privacy than you ever did.
Oh, my privacy is very private. You don't hear much about my life. I'm very, very protective over it, and always have been. And that wasn't a result of the business. I've always been that way. You know, people can speculate and assume. You know, I don't ever admit to things till years later, and they go, "Oh, see, I knew it." And then you're like, "Oh, really? You did that?" So it's just you have to take extra care in keeping things private. It's just all in what you cherish.
Is that one reason why you opened shop in Texas?
No, I opened shop in Texas because it was good for my life. You know, I wanted to live in a place where I felt at home and felt creatively alive and free, and it was a great feeling. And Austin, not Texas per se, but Austin was perfect. Yeah.
And how is it different to live outside of Hollywood?
Well, LA is very business oriented. You're living within the industry. Everywhere you go to dinner, there are people that you've either seen that day at work, and the whole town is generated upon, you know, by the movie industry. So you feel that energy. You don't feel like you're going to be surprised by someone that does something completely different and can make you grow and change. Whereas Austin is primarily music driven. The university is there, you know, huge computer companies. So it's very mixed. There's a huge art community and independent film companies and ranches, and, you know, it's a flavor of a lot of things that I don't know anything about, that I'm intrigued by, and I'd love to be around, but I don't want to be around actors in movies all the time. You know, I would die. And I felt myself changing. It was just, I was becoming something I didn't like.
You have your own production company. Do you develop product for yourself as well as for others?
Not yet. I mean, we bought material to eventually develop for myself, if that's what I choose to do. We just produced a film that wasn't for me. I had like a couple days in it, but it was an independent film and wasn't for me. So it just depends on what's right at the moment, but we've got a lot of product that really has nothing to do with me. Just the excitement of being able to be part of a smaller group and creatively do something that no one's done before, an experiment. You don't have the looming large studios over you to watch for every penny. I mean, they still watch, but not as much as if there was like a $30 million film.